Grateful that you decided to participate this afternoon in season opportunities for community readiness. So we have an awesome individual that's going to be our presenter this afternoon. It's Eric Walcott. He is the state specialist with MSU Extension, Government and Public Policy Programs. He works with faculty on campus and educators throughout the state to develop and implement educational programs related to state and local government. Eric's work focused primarily on good governance, civic engagement, and physical sustainability, seeking to build capacity for state and local government officials that help communities develop strategic plans and well as educated Michigan residents on issues related to state and local government. Eric previously worked in the Michigan House of Representatives and holds a Master's of Public Policy degree from Michigan State University. So Eric, we are so honored to have you this afternoon to share this valuable information that we can then turn around and use in our own communities.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to everyone that's here today. Like Kit said, my name is Eric Walcott. I'm a government public policy specialist with MSU Extension. And so largely I do work with local governments around the state, also do some work with state government and with Michigan residents. And then I'm also part of Michigan's Coming Together for Racial Understanding team and involved in a number of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within Extension and the communities that we work with. Today, I'm going to talk about two programs that we've been involved in the last couple of years in Michigan that really focus on community readiness and being prepared to either deal with upcoming challenges or make the most of upcoming opportunities. This session was actually originally submitted as a proposal for the conference that was going to be last May. So one of the programs I'm going to talk about took place in 2019, which feels like forever ago now. The other one began in 2019 is an ongoing partnership that we've got going. And I see at least one of my collaborators on those programs, John Amrine, is with us today. So John, if there's anything that at any point you want to jump in and add value, that would be welcome. So along with focusing on readiness, I will share about the importance of partnerships in these programs and some of what we've learned as a result of these efforts. Hoping to have plenty of time for questions as well. And I'd love to hear from you all about some of your thoughts, ideas, or learnings related to partnerships and community readiness in your work. So kind of my plan for today is I'll do a quick overview of the two programs, share a bit about the evaluation and impact of those programs, talk about a few of the changes we had to make because of the pandemic, and then share some lessons learned. Before that, though, I actually have some questions for you all, and we're going to do this through Poll Everywhere. So you've got the option of responding one of three ways if you want to engage in this. What I often do is I grab my smartphone. If you got a smartphone, open up a web browser and you can go to pollev.com/MSUE446. Type that in, and then as we get into it, the questions will pop up. If you're already at you're already at your computer, if you want to open a web browser and just on another, next to your Zoom window or another screen, you can do it that way. Or if you'd rather just text in, you can text MSUE446 to 37607. So I will give a moment for folks to get connected to that. And I just put the link there in the chat if you want to copy and paste that into the chat. So we'll give another second if people are connecting. And then just to get us started and see if folks are able to get connected, go ahead and click on where you're joining from today. If you're texting in, you won't be able to do this one, unfortunately, but if you're on a smartphone or a computer, go ahead and click on the state you're joining us from. If the states are a little bit small, apologies for that. I wanted to make sure we got Alaska and Hawaii in there. I've seen too many maps recently that left the Upper Peninsula off of Michigan. And so I didn't want to be the one to leave two states off of the United States. So looks like we got a handful of responses coming in. That's great. Give another moment. All right, so North Central and Southern region look like they're well represented. There we go, a couple little bit more further out west. All right, so the first question that I'd love to have you answer is what's one word you would use to describe the value partnerships add to extension work? And try and use one word. If you have to use more than one, hyphenate it or smush them together, because if you have multiple words, it's gonna split them up in the word cloud. What's one word you would use to describe the value partnerships add to extension work? Priceless, impact, leverage, knowledge, everything, essential, outreach. Yeah. Seeing in the chat, leverage again, understanding, capacity, clientele. Lots of great words here. Yeah, so I would agree. Those are all words that I think of when I think of the value that partnerships add to our work. Those are all things that come to mind for me as well. And so next, this one's gonna be a multiple choice. How well do the communities you work with plan for the future? And this, you can think of it in whatever capacity you work with them in. Maybe it's financial plans, maybe it's, land use plans, maybe it's, healthcare planning, environmental planning, whatever it is. Seeing a lot of not very well. All right, pretty even split there between okay and not very well. So no one's doing awesome at it. No one's at least reporting that they're not doing any planning at all. Yeah, and I'd say that's probably been similar to my experience as well. There's communities that are doing okay with it, some that are maybe trying but not doing so well. And so the programs that I'm going to talk about today really did focus on trying to help communities with that future planning and really emphasizing the importance and the value of that. So both the programs I'm going to talk about today came about through partnerships with state agencies in Michigan. And that was a really important piece of, I think, the success and impact of these programs. Though they did come about in different ways, and I'll get into that a little bit. But programmatically, we partnered with the State Department of Treasury on our Fiscally Ready Communities program, which I'll talk about, and with the State Housing Development Authority on our Opportunity Zones training. And then both of those programs, we were able to get financial support from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is our state economic development agency. And that was also really important in getting these programs going. So the two programs I'm going to highlight today had pretty different origins. The Fiscally Ready Communities program, which I'll highlight first, came out of a curriculum that we had developed in extension around fiscal sustainability. That was a 6-module curriculum that we had put together, and we made a proposal to the Department of Treasury, knowing they were looking to do more outreach and proactive engagement with local governments. And as part of that, we were able to adapt that curriculum that we had been building to meet our collective goals of helping communities better connect financial planning to other plans, such as strategic plans, master plans, et cetera, to help communities experiencing fiscal stress proactively address their situations. So that program focuses on building resilient communities through strong operational and financial policies, providing guidance on best practices, increasing fluency around financial issues, and then also providing technical assistance. So our goals through that program are that communities would be better able to connect their budget decisions to strategic goals, understand key financial variables that impact fiscal health, understand the future impact of today's decisions on fiscal health, and then implement policies and procedures to support fiscal health. So I threw these two images from the program in because I think they do a really good job of highlighting one of the keys that we tried to emphasize in the program, And that's that to be fiscally healthy, to really pursue fiscal sustainability, your budgeting and financial planning needs to connect to all of the other plans that are involved in local government and in communities. So that umbrella image, you see things like policies and procedures, internal controls, regional plans, downtown development authority plans, financial forecasts, and we want those all connected under that same umbrella. And ideally, with the gears, they're all working together and interconnected. They're not going to obviously all be the same, but they have kind of those overarching goals that tie them together, and we really reinforce that your budget should drive your community towards those overall goals that have been set, and that really is important for both setting communities up for success in terms of just overall success, and also helping them build towards that fiscal sustainability. So in 2019, the Fiscally Ready Communities program, we did 10 regional trainings around the state in partnership with the Department of Treasury. That was us going to 10 different locations and presenting this curriculum around the state. We had 333 participants in those trainings. We were also able to offer technical assistance to 2 communities, which meant that we went and spent a full day, a couple of us, and then some people from Treasury, working with them on issues that they were dealing with, and those communities were reimbursed for any expenses with that by the Department of Treasury through funding available to communities in fiscal distress. Like I mentioned earlier, we had that MEDC funding, which allowed us to put on the regional trainings full of charge. And we offered that one financial best practices workshop, was what we called that, in 2019. In 2020, we had one regional training, and that was on capital asset management and planning. And that one, I think that was actually the last in-person program that I taught before everything shut down with the pandemic. So we had plans for 9 or 10 in-person programs, and we got the one in, and then we all started working from home. But then, so we did, later in the year, we did 3 webinars, which we shifted to, and between those 4 trainings, we had 405 participants. So you see a little bit of a trend in numbers that, we did 10 trainings in 2019 and had 333 participants, 4 programs in 2020, with 3 of those being webinars, and had over 400. And so that's been one of the kind of cool things to see as we've gone to more virtual, is with this program, at least, the increased accessibility. And the other thing that in 2020 is we expanded the programs being offered. So we offered a budgeting for fiscal sustainability workshop, which really focused on how do you tie your budget decisions to that long-term fiscal health, and particularly how do you do that in a pandemic when you may be experiencing fiscal distress, and then that capital asset management and planning piece as well. The opportunity zones training, which we called Oz, There's No Place Like Home, that came about through a request from our state housing development authority. Because of our relationships and our reach, particularly in northern Michigan and in more rural areas, they saw extension as a good fit to be able to reach communities that had opportunity zones in them, but weren't being reached by other trainings that focused on more urban areas like Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids, the bigger cities that were getting a lot of attention from developers and from other training programs related to the Opportunity Zone Incentive Program. So they connected with us, and thought we would be a really good fit to bring the skills and connections and really those relationships we have throughout more rural areas to bring this training to those areas, because there are opportunity zones throughout the state, even if there was less attention given to those more rural areas. So on this slide, you kind of see a general outline of what we covered with communities in that program. That program walked participants through a process that helps them develop a compelling community vision and a plan to attract investment to their opportunity zones. And it did so in a way that helped them figure out, how do we align this with our community vision, with our community values? And that included things like, how do we protect against gentrification in our community? How do we ensure that new investment comes in, fits the community that we're trying to be? Our goal was to help them understand the Opportunity Zone program but also more broadly to help them provide some vision related to community growth, whether or not they got any investment related to the opportunity zone incentive. And as I'll talk about in a minute with evaluation, I think a lot of the communities that we've heard from that there was great benefit in this program didn't end up getting any investment related to the opportunity zone program, but they felt like they were better prepared to attract new investment in their communities and to, encourage economic development. So our goals for this were really to help participants understand potential impacts on their community, explore with them how they can market opportunity zones or other economic development opportunities, identify potential sites for development or redevelopment in their communities, identify assets that help attract development or redevelopment, help them examine what they wanted as a community out of development or redevelopment, and then help them kind of think through drafting a marketing strategy for their opportunity zone site, or again, more broadly for community assets or for areas they were looking to develop or redevelop. So a couple just highlights on evaluation. So these questions here, these were all on a 1 to 3 scale, 3 being the highest. These are just the average responses to these questions for the 2019 Fiscally Ready Communities programs. And you can see across all of these, there was significant growth. We did a retrospective post then pre-evaluation. So after the workshop, we asked them, what was your knowledge before? What's your knowledge now? And we were able to compare those and saw really strong results. And then the other thing we did was a 6-month post-program follow-up evaluation. And in that, 63% of participants said their communities had reviewed their existing financial policies as a result of the workshop. 48% had actually made revisions to some of their financial policies. Half of them said they were engaging in additional local government staff in the budget process, beyond either just the board or department heads. Over 40% said had reviewed their unit's long-term fiscal health, along with adopting new financial policies and more closely aligning financial decisions with strategic planning goals. And 75% reported that the program had moderately or significantly increased their knowledge, skills, and confidence related to budgets and finance, which was a big deal because a lot of our program participants were fairly newly elected board members, whether it was county commission, city council, township board. So building that familiarity with the budget process was a really important piece. And then from 2020, and this was the budgeting for fiscal sustainability webinars, we see very similar results, which actually was really encouraging given the shift to online. I think, at least for me, I kind of thought, well, maybe there'll be a little bit less of an impact in terms of what that is like when it's a webinar, and it's a little bit harder to we can do things to engage. I did the poll everywhere thing at the beginning, but it's a little bit different than in person. But really strong results there. And the follow-up evaluation, participants reported 59% had reviewed existing financial policies. 48% of them were more closely connecting financial decisions with strategic planning goals. 50% had taken steps to review their long-term fiscal health of their government. 40% had improved the use of data in making financial decisions. And again, significant increases in confidence related to their knowledge of financial best practices, their confidence to suggest new and improved rules or procedures, and where to access information related to the budget process in local governments. So I just picked out a couple of quotes to share from those evaluations that jumped out to me when I read through these. We asked, share any other changes you or your local unit had made as a result of this. One community said, we hadn't written any of our policies down, so we got them on paper and revised them to make them stronger. Which that was something we also just heard people say often, we know what our policies are, but then when we looked, there's nothing written down. Another one saying, working to educate commissioners and department officials on the importance of long-term strategic planning. This will help commissioners in making decisions that financially impact county's operations and determine whether or not spending aligns with goals they wish to accomplish. So those were kind of some things that stood out. I won't read through all of these ones, but this was just, the question was, please share any other impact the Fiscally Ready Communities training has had on how you or your local unit handles budgetary and financial decisions and process. So you see there, one, we're involving more staff each year and creating long-term needs list. We've begun the multi-year budgeting process and feel it's a great tool to use in long-range planning for our small city. So things like that we were really encouraged to see that communities were beginning to think through what that long-term process looks like and how the decisions they make in a given year are going to be impacting the future. The Opportunity Zones program, a couple of quotes there. The first one, I'd heard of the Opportunity Zones and knew it was a recently developed program. The program makes me think that it falls in the imminently doable category, even for this very small, financially strapped city with lots of beautiful, but also close to blighted property. And then another one, this has opened my eyes completely to how to help build and transform our community. And aside from anything specifically to do with Opportunity Zones, we had a number of communities say that they had updated policies and procedures related to things we covered in the Opportunity Zone program. 9 communities said they had either updated their master plan, strategic plan, or a related plan after going through the program. So it was clear to us that while there was benefit in terms of Opportunity Zones, and that created an opportunity for us, the biggest benefit to most of the communities was they spent additional time looking at and improving plans to help them be better prepared to pursue economic development opportunities, setting their communities up to thrive down the road. So of course, COVID-19 has impacted these programs as it has with all of with all of our programs. But I think for the most part, we've seen that as a positive with these programs, particularly the Fiscally Ready Communities program, because that's the one that has been ongoing. So shifting to virtual has allowed us to increase our access throughout the state and at a lower cost. So I noted those in 2019, we did those 10 regional trainings. And that was, we were traveling to 10 different locations. I presented at most of those, making the trip from Lansing, and then the others on our team, we kind of divided those up by region. And so that was a lot of travel, so time and cost there. And we had about 330 participants. 2020, we did 3 webinars that had 350 participants. So we're increasing access, reducing our travel time and cost. And we have our first webinar of the series is scheduled for next week for this year, and there's 360 people signed up for it. So as the program continues and access is made easier through the webinar format, we've seen that reach increase. And like I said earlier, evaluations suggest that the impact isn't being reduced, which I think is a really important piece of that. The other thing that I think is our ability to be responsive to emerging local government needs during the pandemic was also incredibly important as part of this. Especially as partners to state government, I think that responsiveness was really important because we were able to pivot more quickly than the Department of Treasury may be sometimes able to in terms of program development. So last spring, we were able to very quickly shift our usual fiscal sustainability programming to focus on decision-making during budget crises while maintaining those connections to making decisions as part of a long-term strategic plan. Couple of lessons learned, or as I said, lessons reinforced that I want to highlight, because I think neither of these things are really like earth-shattering new things, but just kind of things that we said, yeah, these were through these experiences, these really kind of hammered home these points. So expanded audiences, again, even with the in-person, the Fiscally Ready Communities program, we were able to reach expanded audiences because we did those 10 regional trainings spread throughout the state. That allowed us to reach areas of the state that typically people would have had to drive, long distance to our programs or miss out entirely. So that program allowed us to reach areas of the state. Again, the Opportunity Zones program, we focused our programming in Northern Michigan and more rural areas, which is not a new audience for extension and is in many ways a traditional audience for extension. But many of the Opportunity Zones trainings in Michigan were very focused around those large urban areas. So because of our access to areas others didn't focus on, that made that an attractive partnership to the state to want to work with us. And then the other thing is that these partnerships have also opened the doors to new partnerships with state agencies and with other organizations. So because of our work with the Fiscally Ready Communities program, two things I'll highlight. One, we were able to be part of a collaboration that developed a COVID-19 fiscal strategy and resource guide, along with faculty from universities across the state and our local government associations. And I'll throw that in the chat in a few minutes if anyone wants to take a look at that. But that was a really, a bunch of guides we put together that were pretty short, 3-4 pages, tried to make them digestible for local governments. So, as they came up with issues they were dealing with in the pandemic, here's a resource guide that might detail some best practices or processes you might consider, that kind of thing. And that was able to have a big impact. And then also because of that partnership, so our Department of Treasury, when last spring started doing monthly webinars, offering resources to local governments. And because of our partnership, I was invited to go on and present some of our work on one of those webinars to over 1,000 people from local governments throughout the state. So it was just another opportunity to engage Extension in that work in new ways through these partnerships. I think the thing I'll add, I think one of my biggest takeaways is the value of working with partners at that program development stage of a curriculum. With Treasury, we had been working on the fiscal sustainability curriculum when we connected with them, but because we were able to be flexible and nimble with what that program looked like, it made our early efforts more successful, and it's led to more opportunities for ongoing partnership. And for me, it's also a reminder to keep space in my annual action plan for opportunities that do come up. So when a potential partner has an opportunity, we're able to engage them fully to bring the best that Extension has to offer and to maximize the benefit to the communities that we work in. So I don't want to end this without giving credit to my wonderful colleagues who I had a chance to work with on these programs. So the Fiscally Ready Communities program and Opportunity Zones programs, these were both team efforts, and I'm incredibly lucky to be able to work with all these amazing people. And with that, I'll just offer if there's any questions folks have, or if you have examples of successful partnerships that you got important lessons you've learned from, I'd love to hear about that and have a chance for me to do some learning as well.
Are there any questions? You're welcome to place your question in the chat box as well.
I just put the link in the chat to that the COVID-19 fiscal strategy and resource guide, just in case anyone's interested in taking a look at that. That was another big collaborative effort that, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that resource with us.
I know in some of our programming in West Virginia, we have partnered with various times some of the local government associations, and we found it sometimes depends on who's in charge, how successful those partnerships are. What has been your experience along those lines?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that it's sometimes that like who the individual is that you're working with or what those individual relationships are. And I think, that was an interesting transition actually for us in our partnership with Treasury, as there's been turnover at different levels. And even as we were kind of planning that initially, just with changes in like state level administration, early on in discussions, that was an interesting piece. So I think, I don't know if that's a direct answer to the question, but I think that trying to build that relationship so it's not just with one person, so there's multiple people in the organization involved. With Treasury, there's a team of 4 people that we work with, and they're not all involved in delivering every program, but it is a multiple person partnership. And then from the Extension side, I showed the list of people involved in that. There's multiple of us, so if one person moves on, there's some continuity there. But I think to the point of, it can depend on who's involved, how successful it can be. Because yeah, if there's a person who's, at a point where they could, where they're not interested or something and have the power to just say, we're not interested in this partnership, that can be difficult to overcome.
Kit, you're muted.
All right, that's one for today. Okay, how hard was it to get local governments on board for these planning efforts? And she agrees that connecting it to existing efforts makes much sense for local governments. In my case, sustainable planning is what most local governments are working on, and that is related to physical priorities.
Yeah, I think that convincing them that it's important isn't the hard part. I think most communities that we've talked to, when we talk about the importance of connecting your budget to your strategic plan and forecasting so you can plan for the future, most of them are pretty quick to get on board with, yes, that's important. The challenge tends to be, okay, how do we actually implement that? And particularly when it comes to like budget planning, for local governments that maybe are smaller, less resourced, a small staff, those can be challenges. So that's one of the things we've talked about actually as a future programming opportunity is how do we make some of those more technical aspects of it more accessible for, again, local units with smaller staff, fewer resources. Because I think, again, getting them on board with that, the planning is important, is the easier part. Helping them figure out at the level that they're at, how do they do it and do it effectively, is a little bit more challenging. And that's where I do think it is a little bit helpful, for us in Extension. We do a fair amount of facilitation of, whether it's strategic planning or just goal setting. So being able to also make that connection where if someone says, we'd love to do this, we just have no idea how to start, we have colleagues we can point to that, that facilitate those kinds of conversations frequently, to kind of help people get started.
Any other questions? All right, Eric, hearing none, thank you so much for providing all this valuable information this afternoon. We do ask that you do our post survey, which is located in the chat. And Michael, will you post that again for just,
Sure.
Just in case we have some individuals
Oops.
that entered the room. And we want to also ask you to please mark your calendars for our final webinar in this series on April the 21st. We'll have Lisa Chase of the University of Vermont, and she will be presenting on agrotourism success factors for entrepreneurship and community. So I feel like that's going to be another great resource for us in Extension. So again, we want to say thank you. Michael, do you have anything you need to share?
I noticed a couple of people came in toward the end. If you weren't able to catch all of this, it is being recorded and will be posted for later viewing on the, either with a link to or on the NACDEP website. It's probably, if everything goes right, it'll be up on YouTube. That's the plan. That's always a great place to put things.
Again, thank you and enjoy the remainder of your day. And we look forward to seeing you on April the 21st.